How's it going, man?
Good, good, good. I was just engaging in my war against both fish and fowl by buying one of these plastic cups to can where they
Uh-huh.
pre-freeze the ice and like you get the straw, and it's so made for alcohol. You pretty much like it's right by the alcohol, so pretty much it's
Oh,
pouring.
don't forget the sea turtles that get the straws stuck in their
Oh,
noses.
that's what I'm saying. Fuck the sea turtles. Like seriously, fuck
Isn't that bullshit though? I heard that the whole straw thing was complete bullshit.
there was one fucking video. There was one video with a turtle, and that's all it fucking took for people to think that every straw kills a goddamn turtle. One video.
Really?
Yeah.
So
And
what do you think about this situation, man?
Okay. So yeah, let me give a little bit of a background here. And like I said, I have a stream in like 10-15 minutes
Yeah, no
on
worries.
my locals. But I've actually this is actually a big debate in the US, right under US law, because we kind of have two different sides. And all I heard was I just jumped in and I just heard your explanation. So the guy asked somebody else to do his taxes, right?
Yeah.
And when he learns the guy is trans or has some gender dysphoria or whatever, he says, actually, bro, no, I'm not doing your taxes.
That's not
right?
quite the thing. So the guy is iHypocrite. He does a lot of like SJWs are bad videos. So he was late on his taxes, as I understand it. He sent it through to a tax agency, and then 2 hours later they sent him back saying, we're not going to do your taxes because we think you're a transphobe. And they're quoting one of his videos, which is, why are so many serial killers cross-dressers?
When you say tax agency, is this a government tax agency?
No, I believe it's a private firm.
Okay. So it's kind of interesting because there's kind of two different chains of case law. And this is a debated topic, but there's a public accommodations chain of case law. And then there's a kind of creative work chain of case law. And the most famous examples on both, which you probably will immediately know, is the cases in the 1960s with black folks in the South, where a lot of places were like, we don't take your kind, and would say they couldn't stay there. So they came up with a line of case law saying, hey, look, even though you're private, even though technically you can decide who's your customer and not, you can't do it on the basis of race, sex, national origin, blah, blah, blah. We've now extended those protections to include gender identity, right? But that's specifically for public accommodation. So stuff like hotels, transportation, housing, stuff like that, that's generally public versus creative arts. So the most famous case, you may have heard of this one, is the wedding cake, right?
Yes, we mentioned that a little bit further.
To decorate the gay wedding cake. And there's this one's more split. All the liberals, all the wokesters, they want people to be forced to create works of art for people that they fundamentally disagree with. By the way, I love that they use it. It's not unintentional that the cases are involving Christians dealing with, for example, Christians dealing with sexual identity, and it's not Muslims dealing with depictions of Muhammad. Because I guarantee you those cases go another way when that shit comes down. When people are getting fatwas dropped on them, I think they fucking tuck their balls in and they start running. But that being said, those cases are more split, but there generally is protections for people being creative. So if I want to create a work of art and I disagree with it fundamentally, whether that's for any reason really, I can say, you know what? It's my name. It's creative. I'm not going to do that shit. Generally, you have a right to do that. Now, taxes would sound more like...
Is there a legal obligation there?
A legal obligation, because it's not really creative. It's taxes. It's perfunctory. And there's two claims here. So there's one, a potential rights violation, right? Some sort of federal rights violation. That's one thing. But then another thing is there's pretty much estoppel, which is, hey, I'm giving this to you to get done. I need this to get done. There's penalties for this to get done, if this doesn't get done. And now you're harming me because you're failing to do this. So I can sue you for damages because I have actual damages for, the delay in time of not doing this.
They don't require malice, do they?
No, the civil side for damages, I think he's got that. That would be a good case. The rights thing, you could kind of go either way on that. I think it's still a rights violation. But
could I ask a question?
Go ahead.
The civil rights protections that have been extended to include gender identity, could the argument be made in the adverse of such that those also include gender identity politics? So people who don't assume someone else's gender, like if I have a right to assume my gender, do I not then have the equal right to not accept someone else's assumption? Like, I have a right to assume their gender or to maintain my view if it causes no harm.
Yeah, that's the issue is that it is causing them. The argument is that it is causing them harm, right? That's the whole thing, is that it's causing them the failure to recognize somebody because of their gender identity that they self-profess, because that's the definition of gender identity that they use, and that frankly we have to go on, is they self-identify, right? And that's the way, by the way, all these woke cases, these woke states are saying, you self-identify as a woman, you are now a woman. Right.
Okay.
Now, sometimes you got to go get a license. Sometimes, there's some paperwork to do, but generally, if you self-identify, that's enough. Now, I get what you're saying. And by the way, I'm not a fan of any of this sexual identity shit, period. I think it should all be thrown out. Right. But the way it's being enforced is based on the person's identification, not your perception, because I get what you're saying. I think it's just as bigoted to force your perception onto me.
On others. Yes.
Right. I think that's just as bigoted. Because you're forcing me to accept that.
Now, another question. Because they have specifically stated the terms of denial of service as being transphobic material, and the material is not transphobic. Look, as I said, the difference in statements is he said, why are so many serial killers cross-dressers, not why are so many cross-dressers serial killers, which are two very different statements. Because they have stated their specific reason for denial of service, can he then challenge that? And if he can prove that he's not transphobic, do they then become liable for denying service on assumed grounds?
Depends what type of cases they bring, because you're using, like, the argument you used, like that sort of back and forth is really good if it's a defamation case, right? Because you're sort of like proving truth, like that's what we're getting at there. If it's defamation, I don't think defamation, if I was a lawyer, his lawyer, and I was telling him to sue, that's not the easiest to recover on. I would just literally go like breach of contract. And
Chad is saying they had the documents for 3 weeks before they denied him. So I think there'd be some other.
Held him for 3 weeks. Yeah, he's got damages.
He's got deadline.
He's got actual damages there. Now, defamation might be harder to prove because you'd have to prove like his reputation and blah, blah, blah. But I think that's where the truth comes in. Literally, all he has to prove is we had a contract, you breached it for not a good reason, and there's damages. And literally, that's easy.
Something they said in that video actually nails them, because he stated, now, of course, you'd have to see the timelines to confirm this, but he asked them when the decision was made not to service him, and they said it was made within the last 1 to 3 hours. Now, if he's already passed deadline, that means that they are aware that they've passed deadline, which means they've failed to provide the service prior to deadline, because that decision not to serve him was made after deadline. So they've already failed to provide him the contracted service, which is a breach of contract.
Yeah, they pretty much... So, like, of those elements, they automatically, like, you have to prove all of them, but damages is pretty much already proven because, like you said, it passed the deadline. So there's not really much to prove there. So
and
it's like
that they didn't make the decision until after the deadline.
Right. So proof of contract, you have a contract. Breach of contract, you terminated the contract. The damages, literally it's after the deadline. I think this one is like really straightforward. Like collect on that all day, every day. And here's the funny thing too. If they just denied him initially, or if they just dropped him for some other reason, they might have been allowed to do that, or they might even get away with it. But because they went and said this thing, it's kind of a big fuck up. I mean,
they couldn't resist though. They had to say the reason. Otherwise, they don't get their own social points, right?
They're fucking HJW points. And that's the problem with modern day America, is a lot of companies are repeatedly getting hit because they are trying to virtue signal to the point where they're taking lawsuits, where they're taking hits, where they're lying, where they're liable for defamation. And they're doing it over and over again. And it's like, why? This is not making you money. This is losing you money. Since when does corporate America, the former bloodthirsty corporate America, since when do they literally commit legal suicide? To me, as corporate counsel, as a person who like has, who still, consults with companies, it's insane when I hear them putting these things forward. Really insane.
Because what that statement they made about the timeline, when they said, oh, we only decided to do this in the last hour, it kind of reminds me of why lawyers say to a client, don't tell the police anything, because anything you give them creates a timestamp that we now have to work around. Because if you say you were somewhere at 11 o'clock, you can't now say you were 20 miles away at 10:30.
Yes, that's why the number one advice I give is, I don't care how you view them. I don't care whether you think they're good or bad. Do not talk to the fucking police, because you are going to end up creating this timeline, creating, just like you said, you might have said, hey, I was getting gas at 11:25. And guess what? It turns out you're getting gas at 11:30. You just fucking lied to the police. So, you know what I mean?
It's an innocent lie, and it compounds.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And the guy said, for example, the classic example is, you get brought in for a murder, and you're like, well, I didn't shoot the guy. I don't know who did. And the cop goes, well, who said it was a shooting? You know what I mean? Actually, and they get you on that. They like catch you on that. The little.
Here's an example.